The rabbi at a small shul in Manhattan sat down one morning to answer some emails. In her inbox was an email with the subject line, "Am I welcome?" The body of the email read as follows: "Dear Rabbi, I heard about the work that you're doing in the community that you are creating. I hear there are a ton of young people, and I'd love to come to Friday night services and dinner this week to meet you. I want to say from the get-go that I am an anti-Zionist. It's important for me to say that because it is part of my identity, and I wonder, knowing that, if I would still be welcome to attend. Please let me know. Thank you. Signed, Anonymous Young Adult Jew in New York." Hineni, here I am. With humility, honesty, and compassion, with a sense of great responsibility, and for now, without one complete answer. I stand before you today in partnership with Rabbi Richman and among the many beloved rabbis who have stood here with this congregation before me. And I realize the fragility of this moment, the fragility of community, the fragility that so many of us feel in the midst of the turmoil we are watching in the world. And I simultaneously hold all of this and recall Rabbi Lizzie Heidemann saying, "Judaism is thousands of years old, and you aren't going to break it." I, like you, have had a very hard year. I, like you, wake up some mornings full of hope about the Jewish community and the world, and other mornings can't believe the world that might be left for my children. I, like you, am scared. I, like you, have questions about what it means to be Jewish today. I, like you, want safety and security for everyone who is longing for peace in the Middle East. I, like you, am grateful that we have security at the entrance of our synagogue and feel deeply sad that this is now normal for all Jewish spaces. I, like you, am exhausted. I, like you, am grateful to be here today, enveloped by my community. Hineni, here I am. With humility, honesty, and compassion, with a sense of great responsibility and with no answers, and I invite you to stand alongside me today, to listen with compassion, to allow yourself to stretch and grow, but without the goal of seeking answers. Not today. Over this past year, rabbis have been stretched to the max. I heard a rabbi describe our role. She said, most rabbis have letters after their names that they didn't ask for, study for, or even accept for themselves. Those letters are usually CEO, MSW, and PhD. You have the CEO rabbis who are strong in community building and organizing, and the MSW rabbis who really serve as pastors and chaplains, and you have the PhD rabbis who steep themselves in text and intellectual endeavors and love to teach. The thing is, she said, you obviously want your rabbi to have pieces of all of these things, but you would rarely expect a PhD to also be an MSW, or an MSW also to be a CEO. And while this isn't about me, it is about all of us and this particular moment. This moment in Jewish life that demands so much of me and of you. You want to pray here and celebrate simchas here. You want to eat here and drink here. You want to see Jewish films and play mahjong and invite Jewish authors and scholars here. You need to be able to mourn here and observe Yizkor and remember loved ones here. You want to hear the blasts of the shofar and sit in the sukkah, light the Hanukkah candles, and sing the 4 questions here. You want to learn and educate your children and study Torah here. You want to get married and name your babies and celebrate B'nai Mitzvah here. You want me to come to your loved one's bedside in the final moments of their lives. And in addition to all of that, holding all of those wonderful and painful and life-affirming moments, there is a war going on in the place that we love. People that we know, family, friends, friends of friends, are on the front lines and in bomb shelters. Far too many innocent lives have been lost because of this war in Israel, Gaza, and in the north, and there are still hostages, including babies, waiting, please God, to come home to their families. And maybe the war in Israel is the thing that is consuming every fiber of your being. Maybe the impending election is causing great worry and angst on your heart. Or maybe it is your cancer diagnosis, or your infertility, or your children's successes or challenges, or your relationship, or your longing for a relationship that you don't yet have. Maybe just being here is stress enough. Wondering what I or the person next to you is going to say or not say, or maybe the burden that you are carrying is whether you can pay the rent this month or buy enough groceries. What is your burden? You see, each of these stories and more are the ones that this community holds. Look around. Guests, new members, veterans who have been in this congregation for more than 50 years. Do you know the story of every person in this room? No, of course you don't. We can't and we won't. But whether you're here for the first time or this is your 50th Rosh Hashanah at Beth Sholom, by simply being here, we already share so much. And as our liturgy reminds us 3 times today, Hayom Harat Olam. Today, the world was born, or a more appropriate translation for this moment, today the world is pregnant with possibility. And for today, we have the blessing of being in it. And being in this sanctuary among people who love you and Judaism and who care about the future of the Jewish people and tradition enough to show up here and sit and pray and struggle with the big questions of the world. And as we hold all of that, the giant mess that is our world and the grief and loss that the Jewish community has endured over this past year, the questions that for me sit at the core of everything we do is what is the role of the synagogue and why on earth does it matter? Why do you come here and why do you need community? Why do we exist? And why are we so critical about this place and the places where we choose to affiliate ourselves? Because when a person or a place holds the most intimate pieces of your lives, you want that person or place to reflect the values that are core to who you are, and you want to feel like you belong. So in a moment of communal suffering and grief like the one we find ourselves in right now, we have choices to see ourselves as separate from the community in misalignment with the core values, or to intentionally seek opportunities for reconciliation and to feel content with imperfect belonging. Once upon a time, someone came up with the idea that we should have a theme for our High Holy Days. Rabbi David Kasher asked the astute question about Shavuot, can't our theme just be Torah? But in following that tradition, I sat with some of the leaders of our staff team, and we came up with Anachnu, we, or more precisely, we are. If you read mine and Adam Lowy's letters to the community in Haruach, you would have read the many things that we are: optimists, pessimists, artists, scientists, children, adults. We are wise, curious, confused, and conflicted. We are strong and delicate, satisfied, needy, rich, and poor. We are leaders, supporters, talkers, listeners. We are men, women, non-binary, straight, LGBTQ. We are Jews, Jew-adjacent, Jewish, spiritual, religious, cultural, and traditional. And if we are all of these things, a big tent or a melting pot or a mosaic or whatever you want to call it, then all of us should be here and feel welcome because we all belong. But for some reason, it doesn't always feel that way, does it? It doesn't feel good when I see it this way and you see it that way, and my priorities are not your priorities, and we just can't seem to agree. And I'm not talking about Sonoma versus Tahoe or lox versus whitefish, though obviously whitefish. I'm talking about big things like war and peace and life and death. This past year, in the context of rabbinic engagement about Israel, I was introduced to a concept called tzimtzum, translated as contraction or constriction, and the halal hapanui, the vacated space that is created when tzimtzum occurs. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, in a collection of his writings called Likutei Maharan, discusses the paradox that God is both transcendent and immanent, that God goes beyond normal limits and boundaries, but is still knowable, perceivable, and within the limits of our understanding. And if God is transcendent and immanent, what can these characteristics about God mean for us and about our human behavior? Rabbi Nachman teaches, Machaloket hi bechinot briat ha'olam. Dispute, he says, is an aspect of creation. Ki ikar briat ha'olam al yedei halal hapanui. For the world was created mainly by means of the vacated space. He continues, this is because without it, there would have been nothing but Ein Sof, unendingness, with no place for the creation of the world. God, therefore, contracted the light to the sides, and the vacated space was made. Within it, God created everything, time and space. In other words, in order for the world to be created, God had to contract God's self in order for the other aspects of creation, light, sky, sea, to exist. Get out of the way, God. Light is coming through, and it needs room to shine. God made God's self smaller to make room for the rest of creation. V'chein hu bechinat hamachalokot. And the same is true about an argument. Ki ilu hayu kol hatalmidei hachamim echad, lo haya makom livriyat ha'olam. Because if all the Torah scholars were like one another, there would be no place for the world's creation. However, as a result of their dispute and their separating from one another, with each one moving out of the way to a different side, the aspect of the vacated space is made between them. Rabbi Nachman teaches about creation through the concepts of an argument, and arguments through the concepts of creation, that in order for anything to exist, something else has to contract and make room for it. God could not put light into the world unless God made God's self smaller to make room for that light to exist. And the rabbis in the Beit Midrash could not hear another's argument or opinion without contracting themselves and making room for those arguments and opinions to exist. Think about all of the things that exist in the world and the space that is needed to accommodate them. Take all of those things and add to them all of the things that we are, our opinions, beliefs, and personal truths. It's too much. The vessels will inevitably shatter. Like with most Jewish texts, we might have some questions. Are there ever times when we can allow ourselves to take up all the space? And what about times when we feel we should be more outspoken and we might be contracting ourselves too much? To those questions, I offer balance. In Judaism, we pray for rain, but not too much. We say a blessing after we eat, when we feel satisfied. The tzimtzum takes balance, and I believe we should strive for lessening the space that we take up in order that others have appropriate space as well. We can and should know the things that we stand for, and those things can live alongside other values and commitments. With the right balance of tzimtzum, contraction of self, our heart will expand and contract as well. That tzimtzum can call us to pray for the soldiers who are risking their lives to protect the Jewish state. And that same tzimtzum can allow us to feel deep hurt and anger when we see some soldiers acting violently and inhumanely. Tzimtzum can make space for an Israeli to say, I just don't have space in my heart for the pain of the Palestinian people. And that same tzimtzum can allow us to believe with our whole heart that every human life is an entire world. As John Poland said at the National Democratic Convention just weeks before their son Hirsch was killed, in a competition of pain, there are no winners. The space that we make for one another, even and especially when we disagree, is how each of us is able to belong, an imperfect belonging. In a piece of Talmud from Shabbat 88b, a group of angels are arguing with God that the Torah should belong only with them and not with human beings. The angels ask, "What is this mortal doing amongst us?" And Moses replies, "I have come to take the Torah to the Jewish people." The angels turned to God and pleaded, "Leave the Torah with us and we will honor and cherish it." So God turns to Moses and says, "Go ahead, give them an answer." Moses responds, "My dear angels, just take a look at what the Torah commands. I am the Adonai your God who took you out of Egypt. Honor your parents. Do not worship idols. Do you have a mother and a father? Have you ever been slaves in Egypt? And do you have a yetzer hara, a selfish and evil inclination?" Moses demonstrates to the angels that the Torah was intended for people, not angels. People in physical bodies who are confronted with the realities of our world, this world here on earth. Imperfect humans who, because of our imperfection, need Torah, Judaism, and each other to guide us, to cause us some discomfort and to bring us back on the road again. We struggle with the big mess of the world, how to be in community with others. We struggle with our own beliefs and fears and discomforts. And our tradition is one very important way that we can sit and thrive through that discomfort. We need each other to help return us, to co-create a home to return to. One of my favorite Torah scholars, just kidding, Brene Brown, a podcaster, storyteller, and 2-decade researcher of vulnerability and empathy, teaches, "You are imperfect. You are wired for struggle, but you are worthy of love and belonging." This past May, a group of 16 of us from Beth Sholom traveled to Israel. We covered a lot of ground in 4 short days. Of course, we went south to witness the horrors of October 7th at Kibbutz Kfar Aza and the site of the Nova Festival massacre. We learned from scholars and public opinion experts and sat with a man whose grandson is a hostage in Gaza. We visited a Bedouin village, a center for shared society, and walked the streets of Jerusalem on Shabbat. It was important to me and to the participants on the trip that we show our solidarity and commitment to the people of Israel, and also do our best to hear, witness, and learn as much as we could in our short time. One of the stops that we made was a visit to an organization called Roots, a network of Israelis and Palestinians who are residents of the West Bank working towards a peaceful existence. We were curious and moved by their presentation to us. So just last week, right here, we hosted 2 leaders of this organization, Rabbi Hanan and Noor Awad. With all of the problems in the West Bank, especially now, it is nothing short of a miracle that these 2 people were in our sanctuary engaging with each other and with us. Rabbi Hanan quoted a book by Rabbi Brad Hirschfield who said, "You don't have to be wrong for me to be right." Noor grew up having never spoken to an Israeli, and Rabbi Hanan grew up having never spoken to a Palestinian. There wasn't a neat or happy conclusion. Neither articulated, at least that night, a vision of a shared future, but somehow they both had the strength and courage to acknowledge that there is room for 2 stories and to be able to travel and speak and listen together. And I was grateful that in a seemingly hopeless situation, our community had the strength and resilience to listen and to hold that complexity. So maybe you are wondering how that rabbi in New York responded. Was that curious, young, self-identifying anti-Zionist worthy of love and belonging? This is what she said. We are proud that our community stands for our values. Chief among them are Jewish peoplehood and Jewish solidarity, which manifests right now as very deep care for Jewish people around the world and in Israel. We show that sense of peoplehood and solidarity by including prayers in our services, like the prayer for the hostages and for the state of Israel. And there is no litmus test for who belongs. We do not ask people what their beliefs are when they come into our community, and we are excited to welcome people to participate. I hope to meet you soon. Signed, another rabbi, trying to do her best. There are congregations in the world where the majority of the constituents share the same opinions. And what I have found over the past year is that this place, for better and for worse, is not one of them. And that, I hope, is the beauty and complexity of Anachnu. That we can sit next to someone who we disagree with, and the next weekend show up for their simcha, and the week after that, sit shiva in their living room. That we feel a sense of Jewish peoplehood and connection, and that those gestures of love and community would be reciprocated over and over again, no matter what. Because when a place holds the most intimate pieces of our lives, we want that place to reflect the values that are core to who we are. When you feel like the world is crumbling down around you, when you cannot access the hope that you want so badly to feel, and when the vessels smash around you as they desperately try to hold all of God's creation inside, you need to feel like you belong. So in a moment of communal suffering and grief, like we find ourselves in right now, for your own sake, for the sake of this community, the Jewish people, and the world, please continue to push the boundaries of tzimtzum. Please make room for yourself and for those who you might never see eye to eye with. Please show up to this community in every way that you can, when you want to, and sometimes especially when you don't. You belong here, and your opinions matter. You have an obligation here, and we need you. And remember that on this very day, Hayom Harat Olam, the possibilities in the world today are infinite. Shana Tova Umetuka, wishing each and every one of you a good, a better, and a sweet new year.